Diversity is when you say that there's, many different types. I think, when people say diversity and inclusion, I think everybody agrees, or most people generally agree that it's a good thing, right? But I think right now we also need to bring in the word equity.
A few moments later.
Linda Sun, a former DEI officer and deputy chief of staff to Governor Kathy Hochul, faces serious federal charges related to a multi-million-dollar personal protective equipment, PPE, fraud and kickback scheme during the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as allegations of acting as an unregistered foreign agent for the Chinese government.
We do begin tonight with the stunning arrest of former high-level aide to two New York governors, Andrew Cuomo and Kathy Hochul. That aide accused of spying for China.
Democrats in New York love diversity, equity, inclusion so much that they decided to hire a Chinese spy to run their DEI program. All right, so when it comes to DEI, I don't know how you people in the audience feel about it. I just feel you need to have qualified people in positions. I don't care what you look like. I just care that you're qualified. But when you go to more liberal places like New York and California, DEI is the standard in which they use to operate. That's how they hire their staff. This is Linda Sun. She started off as the director of Asian American Affairs under Governor Cuomo in 2012, and then became chief DEI officer in the Cuomo administration and also under the Hochul administration. Here is Linda explaining her role as a DEI professional.
Think, when people say diversity and inclusion, I think everybody agrees, or most people generally agree that it's a good thing, right? But I think right now we also need to bring in the word equity, right? Diversity is when you say that there's, many different types of people with different backgrounds, and they're all, invited to the table. Inclusion is when, we include all of their ideas. But equity is when we make sure that all of the people who are at the table have equal access to making sure that their ideas and their thoughts are heard. And unfortunately, I think some of the statistics that you quoted is that we don't have that much leadership or representation of Asian Americans in, the corporate world, the government field, right? And it's to the point that Sandra had talked about, just we don't necessarily see people who look like us. And for myself, as well as Sandra, we both consider Congresswoman Grace Meng to be an amazing, friend as well as mentor, because I got my start in, sort of government and politics because of her. I joined her campaign, back in 2008, and was able to sort of work hand in hand with the community to understand what it is that the community needs in terms of money, in terms of resources, in terms of assistance. That means that when you're hiring, right, if there's 10 candidates, there's somebody who says, well, where's the diverse candidate? You can't come to me and say, oh, all 10 candidates are from the same background. They're all the same ethnicity. They all have the same backgrounds, right? Where there has to be other ways that you're bringing diverse candidates to the table. If there's 10 candidates, there should be at least 5 people in that pool who also happen to be diverse candidates.
Now, Linda was a champion for DEI, but she also had a little secret. She was a Chinese spy, allegedly.
A former aide to 2 New York governors is now charged with spying for China. Linda Sun spent more than a decade working in state government, and she is now at the center of a major espionage case. Sun was first hired by Governor Andrew Cuomo's administration in 2012 and later joined Governor Kathy Hochul's inner circle in 2021.
Now, Linda Sun was born in China back in 1983 and immigrated to the U.S. when she was 5 years old. And she is a U.S. citizen, naturalized U.S. citizen. Now, she has a bachelor's degree from Barnard College, and she has a master's from Columbia University. Now, in 2019, when she began her role as the chief DEI officer in the state of New York, interesting things started happening. As an example, the Taiwanese Economic Cultural Office invited the New York state governor to an event with the Taiwanese president. Now, for those who don't know why this may be an issue, it's because China hates Taiwan and believes that Taiwan is a quote-unquote rogue province. So they don't recognize the government of Taiwan. Matter of fact, they are eventually going to invade Taiwan and bring it back under the jurisdiction of China proper. So with that being said, the government of China doesn't want the Taiwanese president to be involved with any U.S. politicians because they're trying to essentially isolate them. Remember how angry China was when Nancy Pelosi went and visited Taiwan. At that time, she was the Speaker of the House.
The escalating tensions between the U.S. and China, with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi meeting with Taiwan's president overnight. China's accusing the U.S. of playing with fire.
This morning, the meeting China did not want to happen. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi defying Beijing's stern warnings, warmly received by Taiwan's president.
Our delegation came here to send an unequivocal message. America stands with Taiwan.
Pelosi is the highest-ranking official to visit Taiwan in 25 years, a self-governing democracy that China considers part of its territory.
The world faces a choice between democracy and autocracy. America's determination to preserve democracy here in Taiwan and around the world remains ironclad.
But this morning, Beijing is furious, accusing the U.S. of playing with fire. The Chinese government swift to react.
So as you can see, China doesn't really have too much love for Taiwan. But what does this have to do with Linda Sun? Well, Linda Sun, while she was the chief diversity officer of the state of New York, she intervened to make sure that the governor of New York did not meet with the Taiwanese president. And that was because Linda Sun made sure it didn't happen. She explicitly blocked the invitation. Now, blocking that mean aligned with the Chinese government's opinion that the Taiwanese government should be isolated. Now, Linda Sun, being a high-level political operative, went to China a year later, and the FBI got concerned because it seemed like the Chinese government funded the trip. Now, the FBI asked Linda Sun about this trip, and she misrepresented both the details of the trip and concealed that the Chinese government funded the trip.
The indictment included several pictures of Linda Sun with Chinese officials, like this one from September 2019 in Beijing, celebrating the 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. She is charged with blocking representatives of the Taiwanese government from having access to high-level New York State officials. No meeting, please, she wrote to an assemblyman who wanted the governor to meet with Taiwanese officials. Kindly decline. Do not want her to wade into this China-Taiwan sensitivity.
Then a couple of months later, she altered official New York State communications to remove references that recognized Taiwan as independent. Also, internal emails captured her admitting that she made the changes at the request of the Chinese government. Now, this Chinese spy, who is the chief diversity officer, then gets a promotion. Now, with this promotion to deputy chief of staff of the governor of New York, she starts doing craziness like forging the governor's signature to hook up Chinese diplomats.
She was also charged with forging Hochul's signature on a letter inviting Chinese officials to come to New York, which they used to get visas, changing the messaging of state officials regarding issues of importance to the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party, obtaining official state proclamations for Chinese officials without proper authorization.
Now, if you don't think one of your top-level officials working on behalf of the Chinese government is bad enough for the people of the state of New York, it gets worse because Linda Sun started stealing PPP money after the pandemic. So the way it worked is that Sun would steer $44 million in COVID PPE contracts to companies linked to her husband and cousin, and then they would take kickbacks from those contracts. The feds alleged that they took between $2 to $8 million in kickback, and they even had a spreadsheet. Now, authorities were pretty oblivious to all of this until February of 2023. See, the New York State Inspector General noticed that there were these unauthorized proclamations made by the governor and interviewed Sun about them. Now, Linda Sun lied and said that she didn't request these proclamations, but it was obvious she did because they had the text messages. So the IG reported it to the feds as something very suspicious. Then after looking into this quick investigation, the feds raided Linda Sun's house.
Federal investigation into a former aide of Governor Hochul. The FBI raided the Long Island home of former deputy chief of staff to Governor Hochul, and the basis of this investigation is right now unclear. Sources tell CBS 2, though, that Linda Sun held several positions in state government starting in 2012 with former Governor Andrew Cuomo. Last year, sources familiar with this case said evidence of misconduct was discovered while Sun worked at the State Department of Labor. That evidence was then turned over to law enforcement.
So after the raids, the FBI arrested Linda Sun and her husband because they were Chinese spies.
Charged with acting as an illegal agent of the Chinese government, using her positions with state government to advance China's agenda in exchange for bribes, financial benefits in the millions. The indictment charges Sun with failures to register as a foreign agent, alien smuggling, and money laundering conspiracy, visa fraud. Her husband, Chris Hu, 41, part of the financial kickback scheme as well. Laundering the proceeds, prosecutors say they operated nearly 80 different accounts, much of the evidence in Chinese, including messages like this on WeChat. Quote, "I have done many things to make the relationship flourish,"
which allowed the couple to buy a $3.5 million home on Long Island. There's also a $2 million condo in Honolulu, a brand new Ferrari, event tickets, travel benefits, and a special delivery of Nanjing-style duck prepared by a Chinese government official's personal chef. Sun is a naturalized U.S. citizen born in China and was on the New York State payroll for more than a decade, becoming Governor Kathy Hochul's deputy chief of staff before being fired last year.
She had no access to documentation or security information at all, or cyber security. So there was a limit to it. To think that that any foreign agent, any foreign government has the audacity to infiltrate a government organization like the state of New York has to be addressed.
Federal prosecutors say Sun acted as an undisclosed agent of China, working to prevent representatives of the Taiwanese government from meeting with high-ranking New York state officials, trying to shape the public statements of Governor Cuomo and Hochul to align with the Chinese government's political priorities.
Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a guy who's okay with diversity, but when you're so diverse that you're hiring Chinese spies to work on behalf of the Chinese government and still millions and millions of dollars allegedly, it seems like that may be a problem. But that's what they do in New York. So let me know how you feel in the comment section. Now, I'm assuming Linda Sun is a diversity hire, and they started looking at what she looked like instead of who she actually was. And that's how they fell into this ridiculous trap, because it was clear she was a Chinese asset playing the game. And I don't think they even cared to know. She was just saying the right things. DEI, DEI, diversity, diversity. And they heard nothing else and gave this woman access to everything she needed. But as always, tell me where I'm wrong in the comment section. Tell me, hey, Nate, you're wrong about this one. I believe the Chinese spy had great DEI intentions. I'll just disagree with you. Don't forget, like, share, subscribe to like our YouTube stuff. My name is Nate the Lawyer. I'm out. Peace.